Hi, everyone. Welcome to Off the Rak, conversations on transformative leadership with yours truly, Walt Rakowich. As most of you know, in my former life, I was the chief executive officer of Prologis, and since then, the author of Transfluence, a book about the opportunity that we all have to make a transformative influence in the lives of those that we serve and the lives of those that we lead. And so if you've been following along with my LinkedIn Live shows, it's great to be reconnected with you. Great to have you back. And if you're new, I'm just happy you're here. To give you a quick overview of the show, on a monthly basis, I host conversations with some of the most thoughtful voices, guiding leaders to be more human and more influential in the workplace. And if you're interested in checking out previous episodes, I'll be sure to drop a link below so that you can become more familiar with me and also to get to know more about the guests that I've had on the show. Today, I'm really thrilled to have Matt Khourie join me. Matt's a real estate veteran, formerly the chief executive officer at Trammell Company. He retired just a few months ago, last December, and he's got a long list of career milestones. And let me tell you, I have a real affinity for Trammell Company as I spent 9 of honestly my most favorite years at the company in my 20s and my 30s. And it has always been a tremendous company with enormous impact in the real estate industry. Matt, let me just tell you, it is great to have you on.
Nice to be with you, Walt.
Thanks for joining us today. And I know have you been in Houston your whole life?
No, I grew up in the Bay Area, just north of San Francisco and Marin County, and did my undergrad and grad school in the Bay Area, and then moved to Houston with Trammell Company. They recruited me in 1980. So it's my whole business life, which is 42 years, but not quite my whole life.
Okay, because I love Houston, and I had a daughter. I didn't have a daughter. I have a daughter that lived in Houston when she got out of college. She lived in the River Oaks area, and I shopped on a couple occasions at that Galleria that's there. And I know you were in the retail business. I don't know if you had anything to do with that Galleria, if you ever.
No, that was done by Hines, and Hines was the other offer, Walt, I got coming out of business school. And I chose Trammell Crow over Hines just because it was more entrepreneurial. I may get into that later on in this discussion. But actually, where I'm seated right now is in River Oaks. So.
Is that right? Oh my gosh, small world, world. And it was probably before your time, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I'm reminded of the days, and most of them for me were in the 70s when the Steelers and the Houston Oilers were like the two. That was like the NFL rivalry, back then with Earl Campbell, Dan Pastorini, Bum Phillips, all those guys, right?
Yeah.
So I know that was before your time, but I guess they stuck around for a while before they moved, right?
They did. I actually watched a lot of those guys in the early 80s when I moved down here, and it was the Love You Blue. Remember the Love You Blue?
Oh, yeah.
This place was maniacs about the Houston Oilers. We've got the Houston Texans now, but they're not nearly as well liked as the old Oilers were.
I know the Oilers. There were some great teams and some great people. So Matt, let's dig in a little bit. 40 years in the real estate industry. That's a lot. Tell me a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're from the Bay Area, but also, why did you choose real estate?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'll say it really started out by kind of a strange catalyst, and that was the ice cream business. I went to undergrad at UC Davis, and during my junior year, a friend and I decided, let's do something entrepreneurial. And we ended up starting an ice cream business at the Cannery, which was in Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. And started it our junior year of college through the summers, and then had it ultimately for 7 years. The last few years I wasn't there. But it gave me insight into being a tenant, a shopping center tenant. And because I was interested really in how a shopping center worked, I thought to myself, when the time's right, I may actually try to get into the real estate business. So that was, I'd say, part of it, Walt. And the other part was when I went to graduate school, I went to Stanford Business School. I wanted to find the most entrepreneurial endeavor I could chase in business school. And really, it came down to venture capital and real estate. I didn't want to be a consultant. I didn't want to be an investment banker. Those were the big jobs back then that were available. So because of my ice cream entrepreneurial experience, it kind of led me down the real estate path. And really for those two reasons, I think I found myself at real estate and at Trammell Crow. And then one, I'd say, other reason that led me, and this maybe came a little bit later, and I bet you may have had a similar kind of view on this, is it was the one profession, career, I'd say, that you can leave tangible evidence of what you've done, and that evidence of what you've done sticks around for decades, maybe 100 years. So it really was fulfilling, right? To be able to build buildings that you're proud of, that you can drive by 20, 30 years later and say, you know what, I built that building. So that was, I'd say, that factored into the equation.
Yeah, so I have the same thing. People ask me all the time, why real estate? And I say, I needed something tangible to look at that I could relate to. I would have been a horrible software developer. I say to people, all the time. I've got to be able to see it and touch it and feel it. And I definitely could do it with real estate. The other thing is I really enjoyed the people in the industry, but I didn't know about that until I got in it. So no, for similar reasons, I was the same. So our paths never really crossed much at Trammell Crow. You were in Houston. I was in Los Angeles around the same time, though. We obviously did similar things. You did, and I did development, probably some acquisitions, and certainly some portfolio management and the like. And I don't know about you, but I learned a lot of leadership lessons. It was my 20s and my early 30s. I worked for guys like Hayden Eves and Tom Bailey, who I'm sure you know both of those guys well.
By the way, Tom hired me. So
that's right.
That was the common thread you and I have had, is Tom Bailey, and he was a great leader.
Oh, he's a great guy. Those guys not only taught me the business, but they also taught me the importance of people. They really did, and how best to lead them. And looking back on your career at Trammell Crow Company, what are some of, if you had to look back and say, people, what are some of the key leadership lessons that you learned? And I know it's a long period of time with one company, but looking back at Trammell Crow, what are some of the key leadership lessons that you learned there?
There's a few that come to mind. One that I'll mention that you and I share this. It came from cold calling. As you remember, cold calling was the rite of passage at Trammell Crow Company.
Right.
We had, you and I and all these, fancy business school students had to take off their coat, get in a car, and try to lease space and cold call prospects. And initially I thought, God, why are they making us do this? We paid all this money to get this MBA, blah, blah, blah. And the leadership lesson I learned is that there's really no role at the company that is beneath a leader. Every role is important, and even some of the tough roles, leaders need to be willing to do and support. And that was a lesson that was really, really early one for me, because that's one of the first jobs you and I did when we got out of school and started. And it seemed to me that all the leaders, Tom Bailey, other folks we talked about, even Trammell, cold called. And I remember being in Trammell's office in Dallas, and we were talking about, hey, do you know this guy? He would be great to lease some space. Trammell actually got him on the line, called him, and it was basically a cold call that Trammell made, and just kind of it influenced me that, hey, guess what? this is important. This is an important leadership trait. You're not above any role that the company has to offer. So that was one. I'd say a second one that comes to mind, and you can relate to this too, Walt, is leaders always need to tell the truth. Always need to tell the truth. And soon after I started at Trammell Crow, probably 5 years into it, Houston was the first market to kind of hit the wall relative to real estate recession in the 80s. And so I was assigned workouts with various counterparties, a lot of lenders. And one thing that we were told kind of in our in kind of preparation for going into some of these difficult discussions is tell the truth. It was called the unvarnished truth. Just tell it as it is. And I remember Don Williams, who you know was the CEO of our company at the time, managing partner. He basically framed it up in a way that said, do not give any greasy meals. He called it greasy meals. I don't know if you remember that. And that really meant tell it what it's like, tell it straight. And I remember going into some of these meetings with lenders and other counterparties where, you know, being brutally honest really paid dividends, because once they knew they were getting a straight scoop, they knew they were somebody that you wanted to, you were somebody they wanted to work through these difficult times. And so that North Star of telling the truth, I think, was really, really important. So that was a pretty early leadership lesson. And I'd say the last is business is a team sport, and it's not about individual accolades. Certainly wasn't at Trammell Crow. The folks that ended up succeeding and becoming the leaders at Trammell Crow were the folks who knew how to create a team, how to put the team above individual goals. And later you'd see occasionally we'd hire, and it was rare, but sometimes we'd hire a guy who wants to be the one who spikes the ball in the end zone by himself. He was the person who did not get the leadership role. You could see, and down the road he was gone. At Trammell Crow, the folks who were the best team players ended up being the leaders. So I'd say those are a few of the lessons that I learned along the way.
Boy, those are some great lessons. And don't you think some of that was embodied in the person who created the company, Trammell himself? I mean, I think about all three of those things that you just said, and he embodied that.
Yeah, he did it. Then Don Williams, Joel Peterson, really the leadership team in the early stages where you and I joined kind of set the stage for the rest of us.
No question about it. And as I'm thinking about what you just said and those things, and here then fast forward now 30 years or so, and you become the CEO of this company, and you have to create a culture in your company, right? Trammell created the culture in the company that he was in, and we all played by the rules, and we all became better business people as a result of that. But one of the biggest challenges that I had at Prologis was really creating and maintaining the right culture at the company. And I don't know about you, Matt, but I sort of feel like we live in changing times. I think that there are more and more competing demands on a CEO that in this world that pull and tug in certain ways, especially as it relates to culture. How did you, and I know it's a tough question, and you could probably spend hours talking about it, but how did you maintain a consistent company culture in this day and age?
I'd say a few things there. One that's kind of basic, but I think it's important to mention, and that's leading by example. I mentioned the cold calling, which was kind of an example of that, but I think leaders need to lead by example and create that culture that hey, this is what a norm is for the company. Things like hard work. I mean, it's basic, but in our business, you have to put the hours in. You can't. There's no real shortcut to success. So when they see leaders putting in long hours, working really hard, working smart, I think that that creates a culture of, hard work's gonna be a successful factor in my career here. I'd say treating everybody really well, and that's not just folks at your level in the org chart and above. I mean, that's below. That's counterparties. That's brokers, tenants. Treating everybody. I think after you left, Walt, we coined this concept called RISE, which is respect, integrity, service, and excellence. Those are the core values. And we would say oftentimes you've got to lead with those RISE values, and not with everybody, all the stakeholders. That's really important, and I think we did that. Another part of our company culture was make decisions for the long term, because in our business, you can make short-term decisions and make long-term decisions. As simple as in developing a new building, well, let's use a little cheaper facade there because we're going to save some money, and if we sell this project, we're going to be able to make more profits, et cetera. But our view at Trammell Crow has always been make the decision for the long term, and when you do that, you usually make much better decisions. So I'd say that's kind of embedded in our company culture. I'd say another one that comes to mind is when you look at who gets the chances for career progression, we like to see folks who kind of go above and beyond their sphere of influence to help others succeed. And you see that certainly in our company, where somebody in a city, Los Angeles, and we have a meeting and there's a challenge that somebody in Houston is having. If the fellow in Los Angeles says, hey, I can help you with that, and I'm gonna do what I can to share some best practices with you, that's the kind of attribute that ends up increasing his likelihood of being the next leader in Los Angeles, et cetera. So we try to, even though there's no direct economic compensation for that, there is certainly company benefit, and that's an important cultural element, I think, for TC. People go out of their way to help others, and that's big. So I'd say those are a few.
That's great. That's absolutely great.
One other that just came to mind as I finished, and this is kind of I think we've made a kind of cultural component, and that is details matter. Too many times, certainly in the real estate development business, you miss some important details, and it has a fatal flaw can occur in a project. So I think that at TCC, there's a culture of, hey, details matter. Spend the time to make sure those details are right, because certainly in downturns, unknown risks, and you remember some of the risks that happened in your business when you're in LA, risks that are known you can do something about, risks that are unknown that kind of fall through the cracks end up being kind of silent killers in the real estate business. So absolutely, I'd say that's another kind of cultural norm that comes to mind.
Matt, I'm curious, when the pandemic hit, I mean, it's, that had its own challenges, needless to say, but first of all, how did you navigate through that? And did you find that some of those cultural things that you talk about, leading by example, were they challenged? Were they more challenged? Was it more difficult?
Yeah, it was interesting. We all were in different places when we dealt with that. I've got a house in California, so my wife and I kind of got out of Houston, flew to California, and just basically we thought we were going to be there for a month or two, and we're there for 6 months. As you remember, you had to basically stay in place, and it was an unsettling experience because of just the sheer uncertainty, and it was unsettling for all of America. It was one of these. It was just like a wet blanket was thrown over all of the U.S., certainly business-wise. One thing that we decided to do, and that is really over-communicate, frequently communicate. So what we did is we held a lot of calls, a lot of Zoom calls, and it wasn't just Zoom calls with higher levels of management or the executive committee. We had a lot of those too, but it was all hands on deck Zoom calls so that everybody knew exactly what was going on, what the new information that, as you recall, twisted and turned, the new information meant for us. And it kind of led, I guess, to another goal of ours during the pandemic, which was, it goes back to a value I mentioned earlier, which is tell the truth to your people. Don't, they understand this environment. They want to hear the truth. So during, I forget exactly which month, but the kind of the April, May 2020, when, you really didn't know how bad it was going to get. I remember telling everybody, and all of our leadership telling people that, hey, we really don't know how bad it's going to get, because there was a question asked, will there be layoffs? And we said there very well could be layoffs. So everybody kind of needs to prepare, because this could end up being a body blow to the economy and to Trammell Crow. Turns out it wasn't. And turns out relative to layoffs, we had maybe 1%, 2% layoffs. So for us, it became a non-event, but we didn't know that at the time, and we didn't try to paint this rosy picture when we didn't think it was rosy. We really told the truth. And at the same time, we were fortunate enough, because we're owned by CBRE now, and we had big corporate backing, that we could go on offense while a lot of others were going on defense. So one of the, I'd say, elements that seemed to be on the optimistic side, which it was we have to be on our front foot. And when others are hesitating, if we feel strongly about a new project, we're going to start construction. And we started construction, believe it or not, Walt, on a lot of projects in 2020. And when you look back on those projects today, they're some of our most profitable projects, because a lot of folks put the pause button on, and there was a period of time there where in a lot of markets there wasn't supply coming. We had the supply.
Yeah.
Especially in your neck of the woods in the industrial business.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to tell you, these days when someone hears that I was in real estate, the first thing they say is, okay, what's going to happen with all the office space post-pandemic? So I say, well, I wasn't in the office business. I was in the industrial business, right? But it is a good question. And Trammell Crow, didn't you guys, you still built office buildings and the like? You probably not as many recently, I would guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were, we've always been active in office. I would say if you look back pre-COVID, probably 35% of our business was office.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, what do you think, post-pandemic, what are your thoughts? Well, first of all, what are your thoughts about having a more remote workforce as a now past CEO? And let's speak to some of the people who are on this call in real estate. What do you think is going to happen to the office market down the road?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the first part, which is having a remote workforce. It was important to communicate, like I just mentioned. So remote workforce, if you don't communicate, you're going to be losing touch of that workforce. So that's really important. But I may say something that a lot of other CEOs in other industries certainly don't agree with. But my view, and I told all of our people this, is we need to get back together in person as soon as possible, because we are not a company that excels remotely. We excel when we've got a physical presence with each other. And interestingly, that was tough to say because a lot of people were not saying that. They were kind of saying the opposite. And still today, there are a lot of companies that have very flexible remote options for their employees. Although it's turning, I'll get back to it, but it's kind of turning back the other way a little bit. But we at Trammell Crow, all of our leaders, and I would say 95% of our people agreed with that. Let's get back as soon as we can. So if the pandemic if you say the environment started in March of 2020, we were probably back in almost every one of our offices in 6 months, 100% back. Wow. So that was a little unique, but it was really important for us because I think it was we are better together than we are sitting in our pajamas in front of our computer. So as it relates to, and that's the way we are today, we're pretty much 100% back everywhere. As it relates to what's going to happen to the office market, it's really going to depend on a lot of different, it's a multi-dimensional answer in my view, at least, industry by industry. There are some industries that can do fine, and where I think remote working is it's going to stay the prevalent kind of way to do business. And those sectors some of those are like in accounting, in some of the technology companies. Those sectors are going to continue to reduce space, and over time, there's going to be a loss of office space there. There are other businesses that I think have come around to what our position was, which is better together. And even you're starting to see some of the tech companies, the big tech companies, Google, Amazon, where they're starting to mandate a limited number of days, 3 days, 4 days. I see that going back to 5 days with a lot of these companies over the next couple of years. So will it have an impact long term? Yeah, it will have, because there's going to be certain companies and industries that don't need as much office space. But the office business is here to stay. What I wouldn't want right now is a lot of Class B office, because that's the office that people are jettisoning. And the newly built, it's really almost this incredible dichotomy. The newly built Class A buildings in the great locations today that are coming online, they're leasing up just fine at record rental rates. So there is an element of success in the office business, but you just got to be really careful. It's not. It's a little bit nuanced.
Yeah, no question about it. But you know what? I don't disagree with you at all on the people side of the business and bringing people back together. I think that's really, it is really important, and I think you are seeing more and more companies go to that. And so I want to pivot to that a little bit. You've got a reputation in the marketplace for being a human leader. You always have. One of my former bosses, Tom Bailey, we talked about him early, described you as an excellent listener, always upbeat, even under pressure, a person with natural humility, and one who gives credit where credit is due. And by the way, that was just taking out of the first paragraph. There were a few other paragraphs after that.
That's nice of him to say that, but I know it's probably a multi-paragraph answer from Tom.
I know it was, and there's been other people over the years, Matt, that have said that you've just got a high degree of emphasis on human capital. I mean, you've always been a people-focused person. I just commenting on that. I'm kind of curious how you think that focus has allowed you to succeed over your career.
I think if you're a leader or manager, you don't have to be leading a company. You can be somebody who manages people, and they see that you really care about them. I mean, deeply care about them, and not just from a business standpoint, personal standpoint. It creates a bond that is stronger than any comp package or comp letter or anything else. And I think it's so important to show people that you really do care about their business career, about their personal lives. And how do you do that? One thing I've told a lot of folks, and I really believe it, is you need to give more than you receive. And that there's a lot of ways you can try to describe that. But if you can give something to somebody that they don't expect, that in a lot of ways there's no benefit to you, you're doing it strictly to benefit them, that kind of investment in people will come back in spades. Well, number one, it'll make you feel better, just as a human being, but it'll come back in spades as it relates to loyalty, as it relates to hard work, as it relates to going above and beyond, because there's something special there in a relationship. So this is a people business, and real estate's really not rocket science. Real estate is relationships, and relationships it comes down to people.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Was there ever an experience that you had, Matt, that may have shifted your philosophy on that at all, or just on leadership? Was there a seminal moment that, you came to that belief?
Well, one comes to mind. It's interesting how these teaching moments are not some great victory or a lot of them come from tough times. And I remember, you may have left by this time, Walt, but Trammell Crow had bought a company in Florida, a shopping center development company. I'm not going to name them because they still are around, but we bought them, merged them with our company, and it was kind of a disaster. It was a cultural disaster. It was a financial disaster. The pro forma was terrible. I wasn't fortunately involved in the acquisition, but our CEO at the time, George Lippy, I'm sure you probably remember.
Yeah, I remember George. Sure.
Yeah. George said, "Matt, you're a shopping center expert. Get down to Florida, figure this thing out, figure out what we need to do." And so I took the next plane to Florida, and they had offices all in Florida, all over the Southeast U.S. actually. And I met the people, tried to keep an open mind, and I kind of made the determination that this thing isn't going to work. I mean, there isn't a solution other than winding the thing down, and that took some capital and some other additional human resources, and I felt like I was handcuffed because I didn't have any of that. So interestingly, George calls me out of the blue, CEO calls me and says, "Matt, what can I do to support you?" It's kind of a little bit like I just said, this is kind of a people-ish kind of comment. What can I do to support you? What's bothering you? And there's kind of an open-ended question. And I thought, George, well, what's really bothering me, you put me on this task to try to wind down this company or try to figure out what to do with this company. I need this much capital. I need this many new people resources, HR and some others. And he basically said, "Matt, it's done. You got it." And I didn't even think it was a possibility to get that kind of support. So the lesson there, and the kind of philosophy, the leadership moment was, you need to go ask people what they need and how you can support them. And it's all part of being a servant leader. And that's what George did. And so after that, I tried to do something similar to most of my reports, where I'd go to them and say, "How can I support you? What can I do to give you what you need to be successful. So anyway, that it came from a pretty dark moment, but that's where a lot of lessons do come from.
That's where 90% of my lessons have come from. I can remember there was a time at Trammell Crow Company where I felt like I was going to go bankrupt, and I got to tell you, I learned the most from that experience.
Yeah,
No question about it. So Matt, I'm just going to ask you two other questions, and then we can kind of wrap it up. But we got a number of younger professionals that tune into this, and so. Is there any advice you could leave them with, whether it be personal advice, career advice, whatever it is? You've got so much wisdom. And that's the first question. I'll ask you the second one after you answer the first.
Yeah. I'd say two pieces of advice for young professionals. One is, and this goes any industry, look for win-win solutions with counterparties. So whoever it is, whoever's on the other side of the table, wherever you're trying to kind of get a business, or whoever you're trying to get a business arrangement with, don't try to be the victor. That you see these movies on Wall Street, and some guy's the victor, some guy's the loser. That's not the way this game really works. What you're looking for is a win-win solution. What I used to tell our folks is, as you get into a negotiation, usually, there's like one or two last issues on the table. And typically those issues are more minor issues. The big issues have already been worked out. Give on those issues. Give it to them. So when they walk away from the table, they're feeling good. They feel like they've done a great job for their side of the kind of the business equation. And they say, you know what? He was generous at the end. He didn't have to do that, but he did it. So I would say, look for win-win solutions, and don't try to take that last penny off the table. The second suggestion I would have is, and this is a little counterintuitive, but it goes a little bit back to that experience I had in Florida. Take on the tough assignments. So usually in any company, there's some assignments that are kind of easy, sure thing to get done, and there are assignments that are really tough, and where the outcome is unclear, and it's complicated, and there's a lot of risk. And most people, by just second nature, want to move away from those. Where my view is, try to seek those out, try to volunteer for those. And if you do that, number one, you're going to have a lot of learning moments like you and I just talked about that'll help you later on. You're going to create real value for the company, because those assignments, if you can figure out how to solve the problem, are going to be very important to the company. And it's really going to help your career path. I can tell you that, where if you're known as solving tough business problems, you're going to rise up in the corporate ranks.
Don't be afraid to run into the fire, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Have some courage.
Exactly.
I love that. Those are two great pieces of advice. And so I'm going to ask you my last question that I ask every guest. I think gratitude makes us better people. What are you grateful for, Matt?
Well, there's a lot of things, to tell you the truth. So let me try to. I'll go back to a theme I've mentioned on this call, which is, I'm really grateful for the people who personally and professionally supported me and helped me get to where I am, both personally and professionally. I mentioned the conversation about George Lippy, a former CEO, and he supported me in a way to help me really solve a difficult problem. I just think it comes down to the people, and it comes down to those folks that have gone out of their way to support you. So that's how I'd answer that one.
I have to admit, I'm grateful for all the people that surrounded me over all these years, because they made me better too. There's no question about it. Hey, Matt, it's been great having you on today. I really like to thank you for being on this episode of Off the Rak. And I'd like to also say thanks to everybody who tuned in today for your decision to join us. And I'd like to encourage you to keep an eye out for future live stream Off the Rak interviews. Next month, we're going to interview Mike Duke, who is the former CEO of Walmart. That'll be a fun interview. Mike's a great guy. And until then, I just encourage all of you to be human and find a way to have an influence, a positive influence on someone around you each and every day. I mean, that's critically important. And Matt, again, I'd like to thank you for being on. Great being on with you.
Well, it's been a pleasure reconnecting with you.
Real good reconnecting with you too. Thank you, everybody.